Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Daniel, and today in this video we'll be covering my round 6 game in the Quebec Open Championships. So at this point I am 2 for 5 in the tournament and looking to bounce back in this game with the black pieces. My opponent again is a 1700 rated player, and let's take a look at what happened in the game. So my opponent opens with d4, I play my King's Indian defense. Very standard opening setup. E3 is a little bit less commonly seen in my opinion, but still a playable move. Pretty much for me in the King's Indian, anytime it's anything besides from the conventional e4, bishop e2 and castle setup, I go for c6, e5, knight bd7, queen c7, queen b6, a5, a4. So c6, castles, knight bd7, b3. Here I play e5, and I know in this type of a system, b3 is a common move to try to get the bishop on this diagonal, bishop on a3, looking at this rook over here, and try to play knight a5, knight to c5, or even knight to b6 if possible. So here takes. Here my opponent plays rook to d1. The first, I'd say inaccuracy in a sense, because here I simply have the move rook takes d1, and this forces one of his pieces back. Bishop takes. I play bishop e6 here, simply developing. King f1 is kind of random. I play rook d8, and then king e1 is also pretty random, but king e1 I guess makes sense to defend this bishop, but still pretty random. Bishop f8. My whole plan is to sort of stop e4. If you play e4 here, then I simply have bishop to b4, and you're losing this pawn. Play something like c3. I can take this knight with a fork, and this is very deadly because you're going to lose a rook as well. If you play something like bishop to d2, I even have rook takes d2, king takes, and then knight takes on e4, forking the knight and the king. This knight can't actually take because there's a pin here, so this is quite deadly. And after something like king e3, knight takes on c3, this rook is never getting out. If you play rook to c1 here, then I simply have the move bishop to c5 check. If you play king to d3, then here I can simply play knight takes on a2. I can bring my knight back to b4. This is just completely winning for black. So going back, here my opponent plays the move a3, stopping this plan of bishop to b4. Here I play knight back to d7. I want to try to put my knight on c5 and then go into d3 with this pawn on e4 supporting. Bishop to c2. Here I play f5, just gaining more space. Here bishop to b2. Here I play knight c5, trying to get into the square d3. My opponent plays rook d8, solid move. Contesting the d3 square, rook takes, king takes. And then here I play king f7, bring my king a bit closer. King d2, knight back to d7, f3. Sort of consolidating here on the king side. Maybe ideas of playing e4 at some point. Here I play a5, quite the thematic move in like an endgame. My idea is at some point if this knight moves, which you'll see later on, I can play the move a4 to sort of bash up the pawn structure here on the queen side. Here my opponent plays h3, and I see that my opponent has a plan. Knight d7, knight g3, and then g4, h4, h5. Here I play bishop to d6, just an improving move. And here my opponent plays knight d2 and goes wrong. Here I play the move a4. This bashes up the queen side structure. This pawn, it's attacked by this bishop here on d6. And this bishop is defending on the short diagonal, while my bishop's defending on the long diagonal. So this bishop is limited on squares pretty much. It only has the c1 and b2 squares. And here a4 is a really nice move. If you take here, then this is positionally horrible. After bishop takes on c4, you have these double pawns here that aren't breaking through since I have this b pawn. I have knight to c5 to attack this pawn, knight to b3. There are a lot of ideas here and a lot of pressure on the queen side. Not to mention I can just simply bring my king in. Going back, if you play b5, b4, which is the best move, I can simply take here. Sure, I do lose this pawn, but I have b5 to sort of consolidate the structure here, and I have knight b6, knight d5, or even I can move my bishop out of the way, or take this knight and then play knight into c4. So bishop back to c2. Here I play knight to b6. Here my opponent plays g4. I play my bishop back to e6. Keep in mind, at this point, I am low on time as well, so I'm just sort of blitzing out moves. Here now I'm threatening knight to c4 check, picking up at least a pawn. Here my opponent blunders with knight to g3, and here I find the move e4. e4 looks like it sacks a pawn, but I am attacking this knight here, so you do not have time to take here because I simply play bishop captures on g3. In the game, my opponent plays f4, and here I play knight to c4, forking 3 different things, and there's no way for you to defend them all. If you play king to e2, defending this pawn, I have knight takes on b2. I'm up a piece, I'm going to win. If you play something like king c3, which was played in the game, then you lose this pawn, which is pivotal to stop this pawn, and I can rotate my knight back to d5 to attack this weak pawn on f4. My opponent takes, knight to e2, knight to d5 check, attacking this pawn twice, king to d2, knight takes pawn, knight takes, bishop takes, and at this point it's just simply cleaning up the position. I'm up 2 pawns, which are both connected and passed. Here we trade off pieces. I bring my king in, check, bring my king in, and at this point after bishop takes a7, I find a very nice combination to finish the game. Bishop c4 check, king e1, and here simply f3, and my opponent resigns the game, seeing as my next 2 moves are f2, f1 equals queen. This bishop is offside to try to protect it, bishop e4 to try to play bishop g2, which is really random because I do have king takes g2, but just to illustrate, f2, king e1, f1 equals queen, and this will lead to mate surely, e2, e1, I'm up 2 queens, I'm going to win the game. So this game, what's actually funny about this game is I checked it with the database, with an analysis engine on Lichess. It turns out I actually played, I believe it was 11 centipawn loss, which is really, really good. 0 inaccuracy, 0 mistakes, and 0 blunders. 11 centipawn loss is really, really good. To put into perspective, I believe Stockfish plays at around 8 centipawn loss, which means I played really, really well. I'm very, very happy with this game. Literally nothing, no mistakes with this game. Just a positional squeeze to my opponent, and I slowly squeeze my opponent's position to death. So now I am 3 for 6 in the Quebec Open Championships, and hope you all enjoyed this game, and thanks for watching.